Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Centrify's Customer Success Expert Hour on Privilege Management. My name is Steven Feltner. I'm with the technical support here at Centrify, and let's get started. So as you may know, our privilege management product was previously known as Centrify Privilege Service, and it is now part of the Centrify Infrastructure Services. So, a few things. If you'd like to submit your own questions, please feel free to enter it in the Q&A box on the webinar. We will then attempt to answer as many questions as we can during the event. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, quick overview. First, what is Centrify Infrastructure Service? Again, formerly known as Privilege Service, and why is it important? So, you may have heard the term vault. So, really, why is Centrify Infrastructure Service more than a vault? So, the infrastructure service is a component that is part of our entire platform. So, a few things to discuss first are what do the platform provide? First, we do provide multi-directory support. So that means we can support Active Directory users, cloud users, specifically the Centrify platform, Google, or any other federated sources. We also support role-based access control. We then also have workflow and access requests. We also have built-in reports for reporting and audit requests. Now into specifically the privilege service component of the platform. So the privilege service component offers various features. Here I'm going to highlight the main and most notable features. First, we have the secure session access, specifically for SSH and RDP into your systems. Additionally, we have Privileged Session Management, PSM. This is for your administrators to maintain and manage the session, specifically if you wish to proctor and or abort their session. So to be more specific, an administrator can watch or view a current live session of another user. Additionally, if the administrator feels that the user is not doing something that they should be, they can then abort or terminate the session. We also support shared account password management. So what this is referring to is any shared account, you can then go ahead and import that into the cloud product, and then you would have the option to request, check out, check in, or rotate these passwords. Now there are permissions on all of these different methods of password management. Additionally, we have the option to store secrets. These can be plain text files, your SSH keys, etc. And lastly, we do leverage our other products and do offer a privileged session recording. You can record these secure sessions into your systems with our auditing tools. So, what is the difference between privilege elevation and privilege management? So, privilege elevation is, in its name, elevating the rights of your individual user. So, if you were to log in as yourself and you needed to run a privileged command or privileged software, such as editing a configuration file, installing new software, you would elevate your rights to be able to complete the task at hand. So an example, on a Linux or Unix box, a local account would use sudo to elevate their access or privilege. Centrify comes into play, and we offer a similar utility called DZ-Do. And similarly on Windows, you would use Run as Administrator to grant that elevated right to complete the task. Now, alternatively, we have Privilege Management. This is where we manage those privileged identities. And what that means is most of the time it's a shared account, such as root on a Linux or Unix server, the local administrator account, a service account or application account. So the infrastructure service will allow you to keep inventory of all these different privileged accounts and then maintain who can use these accounts. From there, you can additionally add another layer for workflow and privilege access requests. In this situation, the user can ask or request access. An email will be sent to the approvers, who will then dictate whether the account or user will have access to that privileged account. So another good question is, what are the different deployment options that we have available? So yes, this is a cloud product, but we do offer another deployment option. First, I'll mention the cloud. So we do offer the infrastructure services. We, Centrify, will maintain and manage this for you. We do leverage and use Azure to host. We will automatically scale for your needs. This is an important question that comes up in a lot of scenarios. If you are to, add many systems or accounts, how will the performance behave for the cloud product? And this is where we come in and inform our customers that we will scale as you add systems and or accounts. We also promise a high availability with a 99.9% uptime. And as you see here, I've provided a link to our cloud status, which will let you know our uptime for the last 12 months, as well as historical data from the last few years. Additionally, we are SOC 2 compliant and certified. So if you have any compliance regulations or concerns, we are secure. Now, the alternative method is customer manage. That being said, you install the product on premise in your environment. So from here, it is important to note that internet access is not required. If it is self-hosted and all your systems and accounts are local, you can use this product completely in-house without going outside of your private network. Additionally, we also offer a high availability capability for that customer managed option. So you can install it on multiple nodes to give you a clustered environment and give you a high availability. So let's jump into the infrastructure service itself. What views and what are the different rights? So first, what are the different administrative rights for the infrastructure service tab? So specifically, there are 4 I'm going to talk about. Each of these will behave slightly different on the user's experience. So when you create a role, you'll have the opportunity to create or add rights to that role. The first right or administrative right would be the Privilege Service Administrator, and hence the name. It will have full access to the infrastructure tab. This includes add, edit, delete for all systems, accounts, and settings. Next, we have the Privilege Service Power User. This is essentially a full read-only access. So this specific right can view everything the administrator can view as well. Next, we have Privilege Service User. This is going to be the most commonly used for end users. They have access to the Infrastructure tab. However, unlike the Power User or the administrator, they need to grant the view permissions specifically on the account, the system, or for the domain. Lastly, we have the Privilege Service User Portal. This is another administrative right that allows the end user to access an account or system directly from their service user portal. It will look similar to an app and provide a tile for the user to launch. And to give you a demonstration of what these different administrative rights look like to the end user, I'll give a quick preview. And apologies if this is a little small, but I'll point out what to really look at. Here is a preview of the administrative right. What I'd like to make a note on is take a look on the left-hand side where it says Infrastructure. Take a note of what you have access to. You'll notice you have everything from systems, domains to database, secrets, etc. And what I want to mainly point out is I am currently in the Systems section. I have the option to add a system or import, as you can see in the middle of the screen. So how does this differ from the Power User? Well, if you remember, the Power User is a read-only. So if you notice, all of the options on the left-hand side remain. However, I lose the option to add a system or import that was in the middle of the screen on the previous slide. Next, we have the Privileged Service User. Now, as you can notice, this has a lot fewer options than the administrator right. This view, again, will only allow the end user to see the specific systems that they've been granted. So in this example, I have two systems, both with the view permission on that system. So again, let's just do a quick review. So again, here is the administrative. Notice all of the options on the left-hand side, and notice how there are more than those two individual systems. Again, add system and import in the middle for the administrative. Power User, same view of all systems, but no add system or import. For the specific service user, limited view, only the accounts that the administrator has given the view access, and hidden domain and other settings that are not relevant for a normal end user. Lastly, we have the Privileged Service Portal User right. And here is an example of what this looks like. An end user would log in to the user portal and be able to see the specific accounts and systems that the administrator has granted the portal user access. The end user can then select any of these tiles to log into their system. So now we move into systems. What type of systems can be used with the infrastructure services? So we support a pretty vast amount of systems. Specifically, all we support is Unix, Windows, Cisco devices, Juniper devices, HP nonstop devices, and IBM I devices. We also support what we call a generic SSH. This is any system that supports an SSH session. But what we don't support on these specific systems is we aren't able to manage those accounts. However, you can store those accounts in the Privilege Service component so you can do your secure SSH login. How can I access my systems using infrastructure services? So there are various ways we allow customers to log in to their systems that have been added to the infrastructure services. You can simply use the web RDP or web SSH. The way this will work is you'll connect to the Cloud Connector, and the Cloud Connector will proctor over to your desired system. Alternatively, we do allow the use of a native client. This native client, such as SSH using PuTTY, or the native RDP, Windows Remote Desktop. Again, though we are using the client, the native client, we are still using our Centrify connector to proctor the session over to the target system. As you can see in the graphic on the right-hand side, we show that both the native client for PuTTY will use the default TCP port 22, and the remote access for your RDP will use port 5555. So here's a quick example of logging into a Linux or Unix system within the infrastructure services. So here on the left-hand side, I have a privileged service user. I have given this specific user access to two accounts, an admin and a root account. Both of these accounts are local to the system. With the correct permissions, I'm able to right-click on the user, select Login, and have the option to log directly in using a web client, as seen on the top right, or log in directly using the native PuTTY SSH client, which you can see on the bottom right. Now that we've talked about systems, let's talk about accounts. What type of accounts can be used in the Centrify Infrastructure Service? So, for all of your systems, you can have local accounts, specifically for Linux and Unix, as well as Windows. We also support database accounts, specifically for SQL, as well as Oracle. We support domain accounts, so you can add your domain service accounts. You may add your, any other admin domain accounts that you have to more than one person using the same account. Additionally, you can add secrets. What is the difference between a managed and a non-managed account? So, hence the name Managed. Centrify Infrastructure Service will manage that password for you. And what this means is the password will only be known by the infrastructure service. No end users, no administrators, no one else will know what the password is. This allows you to ensure that these shared accounts will remain safe. For these managed accounts, we allow administrators to create a customized password generation profile. This allows administrators to meet any company policies you may have in regards to these accounts. And what this means is if you require a certain amount of characters, a special symbol, etc., we give you the capability of specifying that. Additionally, for managed accounts, we allow periodic rotation. So to ensure no one knows this password, we can periodically go in and rotate that password on your behalf. Additionally, when the password is checked out, meaning a human readable has checked out that password, we will automatically rotate that password when it is checked in or has expired. On the contrary, we have the unmanaged option. The unmanaged option is when it is stored in the infrastructure service, but it is not managed. Therefore, we will not automatically update the password nor rotate the password. If the source of the password, for example, an AD user, if the source of the password changes, you'll need to manually update that password in the infrastructure service product. So here's an example, as mentioned in the previous slide, about password complexity profile. Here is an example on the left-hand side of a Unix profile. As you can see, we give our administrators the option to set the password length, minimum, max. If there are any special requirements such as digits, special characters, etc. We have a profile set for each type of account. So here you see a Unix profile. You can also have one for Windows, one specifically for Red Hat, one specifically for whichever your choice is. Next, we have these are your account security settings. So here you can allow a specific account to be checked out more than once, meaning more than one person can use the same account at the same time. You can alternatively turn that off to prevent multiple people from using the same account. The other few points that I want to highlight here is how do we find out if a rotated account, what was its previous password? We will store all password history for a rotated and managed account. So here in this example on the right-hand side, we have a periodic password history cleanup of 365 days, meaning we will store all historical passwords for up to 1 year. This allows administrators to go back and view what the previous passwords were for a specific account. As you can see here as well, on the right-hand side, we have the periodic password rotation. This is set to 1 day in this example, meaning any managed account will automatically be rotated on a daily basis. Again, this is important. It is pending your policies. For example, a domain account, if your AD policy is set to minimum password age of 5 days, this security setting would fail. So it is important to know what your AD policies are when setting account security settings. Also, by default, an account password checkout has a lifetime of 60 minutes. And it is important to know this because after the 60 minutes, the password then will be checked in and or expired. And at that time, we will rotate the password so that the individual user who checked out the password can no longer use that same password in the future. All right, now that we've talked about systems and accounts, we're going to jump into permissions. So what are the common permissions and what do each of them do? So the most common permissions are going to be the following 4. You'll see this on your system permissions, your account permissions, as well as your domain permissions. So what does each of these do? So grant specifically will allow you as the user to edit the permissions for a specific system, account, or domain. The view permission allows a user to view the account, system, or domain. The view is very important in this case because without the view access, a normal privileged user will not be able to see the system or account. Next, you have edit. Edit in the name allows you to edit the settings of a specific account or system. And lastly, we have delete. Delete allows you to delete the system or account that it's registered to. What's important about the delete option is the delete might not be the only permission needed for a system. For example, if there was a registered, shared, and managed account for a particular system, and I had the delete privilege on the system level, I will not be able to delete the system because I also need to delete permissions on the accounts that are added to the system. Okay. So what are the additional account and system permissions? So besides those common 4, we have special permissions for accounts and systems. So, system permissions. We have manage a session. This allows the administrator or the person with this permission to watch or terminate an active session. The next is agent auth. This permission allows users to authenticate and log on to systems where the Centrify agent is installed. We have an additional permission called request zone role. This permission allows you to request a zone role if you are using the other products that are included in the infrastructure services. Next, we have the additional account permissions. These will be the most widely used for your shared and managed accounts. So specifically, you have checkout, hence the name, allows the user to check out that account, whether it be view the account password on the screen or copy it to a clipboard so it may be pasted into the user's session. You have the login option. The login permission hence allows you to log into the system. Now what's key between these two permissions, login and checkout, is that login, the end user will never see the password. On the checkout option, the user does see the password. So it's important to know that though the user does have login access, we do not know the password, and thus without the correct permissions, the user will not be able to log in. The next permission is file transfer. We offer a file transfer permission to allow users, groups, or roles securely transfer files using secure copy, known as SCP. You can log into a remote system and file transfer using one of those shared accounts if the permission is granted. The next permission is update password. This is an important permission if you are using an unmanaged account. This is not as important for managed accounts. So what the update password is used for is it allows a user or administrator with this permission to update that password in the event the source is changed. So again, back to the example, if the AD user changes their domain password, the update password will allow the user to go in and update the password to be that of the new password at the source. It is important to use this feature so that your passwords stay in sync. Otherwise, your account will show as failed. Next, we have the portal login permission. As shown in a previous slide, this allows the user to have the account show up as a tile on their user portal. From there, they can launch the tile and go directly into the system without the need of switching into the admin portal. Lastly, for account permissions, we have the rotate option. The rotate option gives the user or administrator with this permission the right to rotate the password. Next, we move over to domain permissions. So on top of the basic permissions for view, grant, delete, etc., we also have the option for unlock account. So you may ask, what is the unlock account permission? The unlock account allows you to unlock a domain account that may have been locked out. We also give you the option of either A, manually allowing the user to unlock an account on demand, or to unlock that account automatically. So some may ask, how do we go about unlocking that account automatically? Well, we add a domain admin account or an account with the permission to unlock those AD accounts. From there, we will check any time the domain account is checked out. We will make sure, is it locked or unlocked? If there is ever a login failure or a credential error, we will also check to ensure the account is unlocked. And lastly, whenever there is a periodic password rotation, we will make sure the account is checked in, rotated, and the account is not locked. If any of these scenarios throw a flag or the account comes locked, we will automatically unlock it with the stored domain administrative credentials. Next, we have the secret permissions. So a user can add strings, files, passwords, etc. to the secrets. We have a permission that's called retrieve secret. And again, hence the name, it allows the user or administrator to retrieve that particular secret. So again, all four of these are important to understand, and they all go hand in hand with the default permissions. The default permissions will be shown on each of these individual permissions. All right, let's move on to what are global permissions and how does one apply them? So, global permissions. Global permissions, hence the name, applies to all accounts and systems. Now keep in mind, this is dangerous if you don't understand what permissions you are giving. So to go about granting a global permission, you would go to the infrastructure settings, go to system permissions, and you'll see one for global account permissions as well as global system permissions. Again, this is to give a single user access to all accounts or all systems. And the reason why I say this is dangerous is, for example, let's say I have various shared accounts that are added to the infrastructure service. Once I grant a login account permission, that means this particular user will be able to log in as any of those stored accounts. So it's important to remember that the account permissions at a global level will give access to all accounts. So once I've granted that global permission, how do I go about checking to ensure that that permission has been granted successfully? So here in this example in the previous slide, I added the cloud admin account as a global setting with all permissions. I then navigated to an administrative account, a shared account that has also been added, and I'm going to check the inherited from on the permission tab. The permission tab, then you can see, shows global setting. This indicates that the permissions are being granted from that global permission setting. And before we move on, just wanted to remind everyone, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt and go ahead and type it into that Q&A section, and I'll be happy to answer anything that may come up specifically on what we're talking about or anything that may come up. All right, there's nothing. I'll keep going. So how can I add the same permissions to multiple users? And this is important. Unlike the previous global setting, which is one user to multiple systems, we now want to do multiple users to one or multiple systems. So the way you would go about this is leveraging our sets. So sets in infrastructure service is similar to a group. It's a grouping of systems or a grouping of accounts. So within this set, here in my example, I've created a set with multiple accounts. And within this account set, I'm going to give permissions to who can view the set, which is called permissions. So you can see the cloud admin is the owner of this set, but the user dworth is just have the view permission so they can see the set. From there, you can get more granular and say, now I want to grant the member permissions, meaning all of the members that can view this set, what can they do within that set? So the member permissions will allow the user access to the accounts in the set based off these permissions. So again, in my example, I have the user dworth with full access, grant, view, checkout, login, etc. And this would only apply to the accounts in this set, not to all accounts. This is a good way, if you have a group of users, to essentially give them the same permissions for a subset of systems or accounts. Keep in mind, in my example, I'm using specific users. You can also use AD groups. You can also use Centrify roles to group your users and make it easier to grant these permissions. Next, we're going to go into the Authentication Profiles and MFA. Authentication profiles are important to allow the users to log in and with what methods they can. So, what are authentication profiles? Authentication profiles are, again, what allow a user to log in and with what methods. So as you can see on the left-hand side are our default authentication profiles. If you have the sysadmin role, you can add additional profiles. So in my example, I've added MFA and privilege elevation profiles. Each of these profiles will have the same options as you can see on the right. So you'll have two categories, one for challenge 1, your initial request or mechanism, and challenge 2, which is your multi-factor and second mechanism. Lastly, what I want to point out is at the bottom, you'll see a challenge pass-through duration. This is important to understand what this is. This essentially is indicating that if I set a no pass-through, means if I've logged in and I quickly log out, no matter what, I will be prompted for MFA following this specific profile. If I were to set a pass-through of 30 minutes, if I've logged in once with a MFA profile and logged out within 30 minutes and logged back in, I will not be prompted for MFA because I've met that challenge pass-through duration time. The minute I fall outside of that time, I will then be reprompted for MFA or the mechanisms that you've selected. So how do these authentication profiles differ from the cloud and Centrify managed systems? And what I mean by this is specifically if you're using a Windows, Linux, or Unix agent, and how do we use or leverage these authentication profiles to have MFA be prompted to your end users? So within our infrastructure service, we allow you to specify which profile to use for login and which profile to use for privilege elevation. Again, remember, privilege elevation is logging in as yourself, your user, and elevating to an administrative account to run a specific program or task. So you could have similar or different profiles depending on your options. Now, one of the biggest differences between a cloud profile and a server and workstation profile is we only are going to leverage the challenge 1 option. The password option is maintained and managed by the OS. The OS will prompt for the password, but we will offer the second factor. If you were to set this authentication profile similar to a cloud profile, where challenge 1 is password and challenge 2 is your mechanisms, you would essentially be doing a 3-factor and asking for the password twice. Again, notice this authentication profile on the right compared to this authentication profile here. As you can see, this profile is for cloud. This allows the user to log in with password, then your other mechanisms. Going back to this profile, the OS will handle the password, and then we are prompted for challenge 1, which these are the available options. So, without further ado, I've given you guys a great summary and overview of the most common used features in the infrastructure service. And I wanted to open the floor for anyone that had questions in regards to anything I've talked about or anything that's come up. Okay, I see, looks like we have a question from one of the participants asking, what does the manage session permission do? So again, the manage session allows an administrator or user to view the shared account or user's secure session. This allows them to proctor or terminate that session. So again, if a user logs in, the administrator can watch or proctor the account in real time. Second, they also have the option to terminate the account. So if a user is doing something that the administrator does not wish, the administrator can then go ahead and terminate their session, and therefore ending the session to the end user. Great question. And we have another question that came in. If we allow multiple password checkouts and specify the checkout lifetime as 60 minutes, does that mean two people who check out within the 1 hour will get the same password? Oh, great question. So again, let me rephrase so everyone can hear the question and understand. The question was, we are going to allow multiple password checkouts for a single account, meaning I can check out the password and a colleague of mine can also check out the password. Remember, the default lifetime of a password checkout is 60 minutes. So the question specifically is asking, the two people who check out within that 1 hour, do they get the same password? That is a great question. And the answer is yes, they will get the same password. However, once they check that in, it will be rotated and all new password checkouts will have a different password. Similarly, the old password will still allow them to log in to the system, as well as if they are currently logged in and the checkout expires, their session will still be active because they have already logged into the system. So the 60 minutes is strictly the time frame the user has to take that password and log in. Once they've logged in, there's no need to use that password any further. And at that point, it can be checked in or just let the time remaining run out and expire. We will handle both use cases and rotate the password for you. So great question. Okay, we have another question. So we have another question from a participant that's asking specifically, what do I need to support session recording? And this is a great question. So session recording, similarly, we call auditing. If you want to record your secure sessions, both via SSH and RDP, so that you may review them at a later time or see what commands were ran by that user in that session, you can leverage the remaining of our infrastructure services components. In our infrastructure service components, we offer an enterprise version that has what used to be known as CSS Direct Audit. Those allow you to install a SQL server on-premise as well as a collector to essentially collect that information and store it for your review. From there, you can audit and review those sessions accordingly. So again, what do you need to support session recording? You will need to leverage our other components that are part of the Centrify Infrastructure Services, specifically the Enterprise Suite and the Direct Audit components. And we have another one that came in. For MFA in Windows, is Server Suite a requirement? This is another great question. So we have two ways of doing MFA. We have MFA for a zoneless agent, which does not require a Server Suite requirement. And another one is zone mode, which does require a Server Suite license. So what is the difference between zone and zoneless in regards to MFA on Windows? So again, if you use the zoneless mode, you are only allowed to do MFA. There will be no privilege elevation and nothing in regards to zones or granular group permissions to access that Windows server. The zoneless mode is strictly to enable MFA for your AD users on your Windows environment. Now, on the contrary, you have the zone mode, which does require that Server Suite license. What does this enable you to do? It enables you to granular control which users have access to the box, as well as give you the option to set up privilege elevation. For example, if you have specific users that need access to the local administrative account to do some troubleshooting, you can allow them to elevate to that account when needed. Again, the zoneless mode does not have this feature and does not dictate who can log into the box, only dictates who will be prompted for MFA when logging into the Windows system. And again, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free. Next question, looks like we have a question about the administrative right. So on the Privilege Service User Administrative Right, there was an exclamation mark against an entry. What does that mean? And that's a great question. And if you guys don't mind, I'll flip back to that slide to just show you what that was in referring to. So here we go, permissions. Here we go. So the question here was, why was there an exclamation point next to that first system in this particular view? So if you notice on the far right, there's a status. And what this is indicating is that the system is unreachable at this time. Now, what's important to know is that we will do periodic health checks of all accounts and systems. That health check is controlled by the account settings, and by default is done every hour. So though the system may be up, it could be that once the health check is reran or processes, this will then show as a normal system. What I want to also point out is that though the system is unreachable, currently you may still be able to log in, but it is just giving you a upfront warning that at one point the system was down. Again, what I want to also point out is that hence the name infrastructure, we hope that these systems should be online 24/7, and this indicates that the system was down at one point or was not able to be reached. So great question. Next, we have another question that came in. Does the native SSH support only PuTTY? And what about other third-party clients? That's another great question. At this time, the Centrify Infrastructure Service only supports the native SSH client with PuTTY. There are plans to, in the future, support additional clients, but at this time, we only support the PuTTY SSH. And about Macs, there was another question about what about Macs? So when it goes to systems, if you remember, I indicated that you could add a Unix system, a Linux system, Windows system, etc. The question here is, what about Macs? So Macs, though can be added, is not recommended because these systems are typically not fall under the category of an infrastructure system. These are usually workstations and would fall under the category of an endpoint. For those type of systems, we have an alternative component that would take care of those systems. Okay, we have another question. So the question here from another participant indicated, for system access, what ports are needed in our firewall? We noticed that in the accessing the system slide, you indicated port 22 and port 555. Those are not the default RDP port, and what is needed and what needs to be opened for that communication. So, great question again. The port 22 is the default for SSH, and we chose for our RDP, native, specifically native RDP, we'll use port 5555. Now a question may come up about, what if we want to change that port? That port is changeable by the Centrify support staff, and you may request to have that port changed to meet your requirements. Now, in terms of what firewall holes or rules we need to have, is these ports need to be opened from the internal system and to your cloud or Centrify connector. Again, this is all internal, and it needs to be inbound for the connector, not an outbound. The only ports that need to be opened outside of your internal network is going to be port 80 and 443, HTTP and HTTPS. We do not require any other external firewall ports to be opened besides those two. Everything else will be done internally for your systems and AD to communicate with the connector, who then proxies that information to the cloud. So we have another question from another participant. What happens if CPS on-prem doesn't have internet access? This is a great question. So again, we have two deployment styles and methods. You can install it via the cloud or on-prem. And I mentioned in one of my slides that CPS on-prem does not need or require internet access. So what happens? Well, you will not be able to access your platform remotely outside of your company's network. One of the use cases for this product is you can allow outside parties, such as contractors, outsourced IT, access to your environment without the need of a VPN or any extra third-party tools. So if your CPS on-prem does not have internet access, you will not be able to access it remotely. Everything will be internally. So your cloud connector, rather than going out to the internet on port 80 or 443, you'll be connecting to a local server on the box. And because everything is local, your accounts, your systems, and your platform, there'll be no need to open any external firewall ports. Okay, and I'll give you guys another minute to digest all that information you've received today, and I'll give you another minute or two to, if there's any last-minute questions. And again, if you're shy or you have a question that comes up at a later time, you can always post that in our community, and we'll be monitoring that and answer them appropriately. Okay, I don't see any other questions coming in, so I wanted to take the time to thank you all for joining this webinar today. And again, if you have any question about today's presentation, please do not hesitate to post them in our community, and we will get back to you. Again, that is community@centrify.com. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of your week.